The oak-paneled courtroom felt stifling, as if the very air pressed down on everyone inside. Rows of spectators filled the gallery, their hushed whispers rippling like a low tide. Every gaze was fixed on the young man standing at the defense table, his shoulders squared, his chin lifted. He looked too young, almost out of place in the cavernous hall. His name was Marcus Reed, 19 years old, accused of auto theft and resisting arrest. The charges were serious enough to crush anyone his age. From the bench, Judge Harold Whitman leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lazily on polished mahogany. His silver glasses slid down the bridge of his nose as he looked over them at Marcus. The judge's mouth curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. "This isn't a school debate, son," Whitman said dryly, his voice echoing. "Don't think you'll talk your way out of this." A chuckle moved through the courtroom. Jurors, clerks, even the bailiff. They all seemed to share the joke. But Marcus didn't laugh. His hands were buried in his pockets, his dark eyes steady, his jaw tight. He wasn't here to entertain them. He was here to fight. The prosecutor, Daniel Mercer, rose from his chair with the polished confidence of a man who had done this 100 times before. His navy suit was crisp, his tie knotted perfectly. He strolled toward the jury box, clicking his pen shut as if it were a weapon. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mercer began, "the evidence will show beyond a shadow of a doubt that Marcus Reed was caught behind the wheel of a stolen 2022 Lexus sedan." The gallery shifted, murmurs rising. Mercer fed on it. He flipped through papers like he was turning the pages of a story he had already memorized. Officers pursued the defendant through downtown. He attempted to flee, ignoring commands. His fingerprints were lifted directly from the steering wheel. The arresting officer's testimony will make it clear. This was no misunderstanding. This was theft, plain and simple. Judge Whitman nodded slowly, looking bored but convinced. To him, the case seemed airtight. Marcus stood still, absorbing every word. He could almost hear the jurors' minds clicking shut. Mercer had made it sound too easy, too certain. But Marcus had studied enough trials in his life to know, the first version of a story is rarely the whole truth. When it came time for the defense, Marcus's court-appointed lawyer, Sarah Cole, rose hesitantly. She cleared her throat, her hands trembling as she unfolded her notes. But Marcus placed a hand lightly on her arm. She froze, eyes wide. He gave a small shake of his head. Then he stood, his voice calm but carrying. "Your Honor," Marcus said, "I'll be representing myself." The words dropped like a stone into still water. The courtroom rippled with gasps. Even Judge Whitman leaned forward, his amusement deepening. "You'll what?" the judge asked. "I'll be defending myself." For the first time, Mercer's smirk faltered. A flicker of surprise crossed his face before he barked a short laugh. "This should be entertaining," he muttered. But Marcus wasn't joking. He stepped out from behind the defense table, his stance relaxed yet deliberate. His eyes scanned the room, not with arrogance, but with a sharpness that demanded attention. The atmosphere shifted. This wasn't going to be routine. Marcus let the silence stretch, every second heightening the tension. Finally, he spoke. "Your Honor, before we begin, I'd like clarification from the prosecution. Mr. Mercer stated that Officer James Grant personally witnessed me behind the wheel of the vehicle. Is that correct?" Mercer crossed his arms. "That's right. It's in his report." Marcus nodded, then turned to Judge Whitman. "I move to strike that testimony, on the grounds that Officer Grant was not even on duty when the chase began." The room buzzed. Mercer stiffened. "Objection. This is baseless." Marcus cut him off smoothly. "Then let's verify his GPS logs. If he was where he claimed to be, the data will prove it. But I doubt it will." A hush fell. Jurors exchanged wary glances. Even Whitman tilted his head, scrutinizing Marcus more carefully. For the first time, the courtroom wasn't laughing. Prosecutor Mercer adjusted his tie, trying to shake off the unease. "While we wait for irrelevant records, the state still has fingerprints tying the defendant directly to the stolen car." Marcus nodded slowly, pacing toward the jury box. His steps were deliberate, measured. "That's true," he admitted. "But let's think about what that really means." His gaze shifted from juror to juror. "If you walk into a clothing store and try on a jacket, your fingerprints end up on it. Hours later, someone steals that jacket. Do your fingerprints prove you're the thief?" A few jurors exchanged startled glances. Someone in the gallery murmured, "That makes sense." Marcus pressed forward. "Yes, my prints were on the car. Because earlier that evening, I leaned on it outside a convenience store. The door was unlocked, and I opened it. Stupid curiosity, nothing more. I never drove it, never stole it." He let the words sink in. Then, with a sharper tone, "And let's not forget the forensic specialist who processed those prints. Nowhere to be found. No testimony. No cross-examination. The state wants you to take their word without scrutiny, without challenge. That's not justice. That's assumption." Judge Whitman rubbed his temple, the first trace of concern flickering across his face. Marcus reached for a document inside his folder. He held it up for all to see. "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce a police transcript. One the prosecution conveniently left out of their filings." Mercer's jaw tightened. "This is from the registered owner of the Lexus, Mr. Charles Denton. He told officers, quote, 'I left the car running outside the gas station. A kid jumped in and took off. But it wasn't the young man you arrested. The person I saw was white.'" The gallery erupted in gasps. A reporter's pen scratched furiously across paper. Marcus turned slowly, letting the weight of the revelation hang in the room. That statement was ignored, suppressed, buried. Why? Because it didn't fit the story they wanted to sell. Judge Whitman's smirk was gone. His lips pressed into a thin line. He glanced at Mercer, who avoided his gaze. "This is the foundation of the state's case?" Marcus asked, his voice cutting like glass. "Fingerprints without a witness. Testimony contradicted by GPS data. And the owner himself saying I wasn't the suspect." The silence that followed was deafening. Mercer stepped forward, his voice louder now, almost desperate. "Your Honor, the defendant was found near the abandoned vehicle. That proximity cannot be ignored." Marcus shook his head calmly. "I was blocks away, walking home with friends after buying snacks. Not running, not hiding, just existing in the wrong place at the wrong time." He turned toward the jury once more. His voice softened but carried unmistakable force. "The real suspect disappeared that night. But instead of chasing him, the police grabbed the first black kid they saw nearby. That's what this case is about, assumptions, not truth. Bias, not justice." Every word hit the room like a hammer. The jurors leaned in. The gallery sat frozen. Even Judge Whitman shifted uncomfortably in his chair. For the first time, the scales seemed to tip. The silence stretched until Whitman finally spoke, his voice lower now. "Mr. Mercer, do you have anything further?" Mercer's face flushed red. He hesitated, shuffled his papers, then muttered, "No, Your Honor." The judge exhaled, his gavel hovering above the block. He looked at Marcus for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Respect, maybe even regret. Then he struck the gavel. Case dismissed. Chaos erupted. Half the courtroom gasped in disbelief. The other half broke into relieved murmurs. Reporters shot up from their seats, scribbling furiously. Marcus didn't flinch. He stood still, letting the weight of the words sink in for everyone else. For him, the fight was over the moment the truth came out. But as he turned to leave, Judge Whitman's voice cut through the noise. "Mr. Reed." Marcus paused. Whitman cleared his throat. "You should consider law school." For the first time, Marcus allowed himself the faintest smile. "Already on it, Your Honor." The courthouse steps buzzed with chaos. Reporters swarmed like bees, shoving microphones and cameras toward Marcus. "Marcus, how did you pull this off? Did you expect the case to be dismissed? What's next for you?" He ignored them, tugging his hood up over his head. He wasn't here for spectacle. He was here because the system had tried to bury him, and he had refused to let it. At the bottom of the steps, his mother, Janet Reed, stood waiting. Her arms were crossed, her eyes narrowed with a cocktail of fear and pride. "You nearly gave me a heart attack," she muttered, pulling him into a fierce hug. He chuckled softly. "I had to take a risk, Mom." "You always do," she whispered, holding him tighter. Across the street, Judge Whitman lingered by his car, watching quietly. His arrogant posture was gone. What remained was reflection. He hadn't expected this case to rattle him, but it had. Marcus looked back at the courthouse one last time. It was more than a building, it was a reminder of how fragile justice could be. How many people, he thought, never get the chance to fight like I did? How many are crushed by the same shortcuts and biases? The questions burned inside him. They weren't just about this case. They were about all of them. He knew then, this wouldn't be the last courtroom he stood in. But next time, he wouldn't be the defendant. He'd be the attorney. And he'd make sure others got the chance he almost lost. The cameras still flashed, the crowd still shouted. But Marcus's eyes were fixed on something beyond all of it. A future he was already chasing. By the next morning, Marcus's name was everywhere. Headlines blazed across television screens. Teen defendant outsmarts veteran prosecutor in stunning courtroom upset. Judge dismisses case after shocking self-defense by teen. Clips of him standing tall in the courtroom played on repeat. Social media buzzed with hashtags. Hashtag Justice for Marcus and hashtag Teen Lawyer. Reporters camped outside his mother's small apartment complex. News vans lined the street. Every neighbor peeked through blinds, whispering about the young man who had embarrassed the system on live record. Inside, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone. Millions of views, thousands of comments. Some hailed him as a genius. Others dismissed him as lucky. His mother placed a steaming mug of coffee in front of him. "This isn't going away," she warned. "I know," Marcus replied softly. "That's the point." Later that afternoon, an unexpected visitor knocked at their door. It was Arthur Blake, a retired defense attorney who had once worked alongside Marcus's mother at the law office. He carried a worn leather briefcase and eyes sharp with curiosity. "I watched the footage," Blake said after Marcus invited him inside. "Kid, you didn't just defend yourself. You dismantled that prosecutor. That's not instinct. That's training." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I've been studying law for years, reading case files, watching trials online. My mom's stories taught me more than I realized." Blake leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "You have a gift, but gifts without guidance burn out. If you're serious, I'll help you. I'll teach you the parts they don't write down in textbooks." Marcus hesitated. He had always dreamed of being an attorney. But now the choice wasn't about dreaming, it was about deciding. Finally, he nodded. "I'm serious." Blake smiled faintly. "Then let's get to work." Not everyone celebrated Marcus. The district attorney's office released a statement the next day, insisting the dismissal was procedural and warning against misleading narratives. Talk shows debated whether Marcus was a prodigy or just a reckless kid who got lucky. At school, reactions were split. Some classmates slapped his back, calling him a hero. Others muttered that he had embarrassed the city, that he made the police look incompetent. Walking through the halls, Marcus felt the weight of every stare. His friends tried to joke about it, but he knew the truth. His life had shifted. He wasn't just Marcus Reed anymore. He was the kid who beat the system, and that title carried enemies as well as admirers. A week later, Marcus found himself sitting under bright studio lights. A popular talk show had invited him for a live interview. His mother had resisted at first, but Blake insisted it was an opportunity to control his narrative. The host leaned forward with a polished smile. "Marcus, millions watched your courtroom footage. People are calling you a genius. How does it feel?" Marcus shifted in his chair, the cameras unblinking. "I didn't outsmart anyone. I just asked the questions that should have been asked. Questions the system ignored." The audience clapped. The host pressed on. "Do you see yourself pursuing law as a career?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Yes, But not just for me. For the people who don't have a voice. For those who get swallowed by assumptions, by shortcuts, by bias. The applause thundered. The cameras captured it. That clip would be shared millions of times before the week ended. Behind closed doors, not everyone was clapping. In a glass-walled office downtown, District Attorney Evelyn Carter sat with Mercer, her expression sharp and cold. "You lost control of a case against a 19-year-old, she snapped. "And now he's a national symbol." Mercer clenched his fists. The judge followed your lead." Carter cut him off. "And you stumbled. This kid just made a mockery of our office. That can't happen again." She leaned forward. "We don't just need to rebuild our image. We need to remind people who holds the power in this city." Mercer nodded slowly, a dangerous resolve hardening in his eyes. Marcus Reed might have won the first battle, but the system was preparing for war. The apartment was quiet that night. Marcus sat at his desk, books stacked high around him. Law journals, case studies, transcripts. He ran his finger across a highlighted passage, whispering the words under his breath. His mother peeked into the room, leaning against the doorframe. "Marcus, you've been at this for hours. You need rest." "I can't stop now," he replied without looking up. "They're coming after me, Mom. You heard the DA. They'll try to make me the example." She sighed, walking over to place a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Then don't just fight for yourself. Fight smart. And don't forget why you started." Marcus finally looked up. In her eyes he saw not fear but belief, and that was enough to keep going. Word of Marcus's courtroom triumph reached his school administrators. They invited him to join a debate hosted by the Student Council on the theme of justice and youth in America. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Marcus took the stage against a well-prepared student who argued that the system mostly works, and that Marcus was an outlier, not proof of systemic failure. Marcus waited until it was his turn. He stepped forward, gripping the microphone. "If the system mostly works, then why do stories like mine exist at all? Why are innocent people fighting uphill battles against assumptions instead of evidence?" The crowd erupted in applause. Even some teachers nodded, their expressions thoughtful. Marcus realized then, his words weren't just echoing in courtrooms anymore. They were shaping young minds. A few days later, Marcus received a message from someone unexpected, Judge Harold Whitman himself. The message was short. "Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m., coffee shop on Main." Marcus almost didn't go, but curiosity got the better of him. When he arrived, Whitman was already seated, his usual arrogance replaced with something quieter. He gestured for Marcus to sit. "You rattled me," the judge admitted. "I've seen hundreds of defendants. Most are guilty, many are broken. But you made me see how easy it is to stop looking deeper." Marcus studied him. "So why reach out to me?" Whitman leaned forward. "Because I think you're going to do more than defend yourself. And when you do, you'll need people who understand the system from the inside. Even people like me." It wasn't friendship. It was respect. And respect from a judge was a powerful thing. That night, as Marcus walked home from Blake's office, a black sedan slowed beside him. The window rolled down, and a man in a dark suit leaned out. "You're making powerful enemies, Reed," the man said coldly. "Drop this crusade before you regret it." The car sped off, leaving Marcus frozen under the streetlight. His chest tightened, but his fists clenched. He wasn't naive. He knew his fight wasn't just against prosecutors in suits. It was against an entire system that protected itself. And they weren't above intimidation. But instead of fear, a spark of determination ignited in him. If they were trying to scare him, it meant they were worried. Later that night, Marcus stood at his bedroom window, staring out at the city lights. The warning still echoed in his ears. But fear wasn't what filled him. It was resolve. "This isn't about me anymore," he whispered to his reflection. "It's about everyone who doesn't get heard. Everyone who never got the chance I did." He placed a hand on the glass, his eyes burning with intensity. "I'm not backing down. Not now. Not ever. Behind him, on the desk, the glow of his laptop screen lit up the words he had typed. Application for pre-law scholarship. The future wasn't waiting for him. He was chasing it. The following month, Marcus received a letter with an embossed seal. State University of California School of Law, Pre-Law Scholarship Program. He tore it open at the kitchen table, his mother watching anxiously. His eyes widened as he read. Marcus Reed. The letter began, "Your exceptional demonstration of legal reasoning has captured national attention. We are pleased to offer you a full scholarship for our pre-law initiative." Janet gasped, covering her mouth. Full scholarship? Marcus exhaled, relief washing over him. Full ride. For the first time since the trial, the weight on his shoulders eased. The system had tried to label him a criminal, but now, doors were opening he never thought possible. Arthur Blake met Marcus at the library that afternoon. Piles of law books surrounded them, the air heavy with the scent of old paper. "You're in," Blake said, glancing at the letter. "But don't mistake opportunity for victory. Law school will test you harder than any courtroom moment you've faced so far." Marcus leaned forward. "I'm ready." Blake narrowed his eyes. "No, you're not. Not yet. You still argue like someone who has everything to prove. That fire works in a single trial, but if you want to survive in this world, you'll need discipline, strategy, patience." Marcus swallowed, nodding. He respected Blake too much to argue. "Then teach me," he said simply. Blake smirked. "I already am." News broke of another controversial case. A young woman named Tasha Bell, accused of theft after being caught near a burglary scene. The evidence was shaky, but the prosecutor painted her as guilty from the start. Watching the coverage on TV, Marcus clenched his fists. The parallels to his own case were too sharp to ignore. "That could have been me," he muttered. His mother glanced at him. "Marcus, you're not a lawyer yet. You can't jump into every fight." "I know," Marcus said quietly, "but I can't just watch either." Arthur Blake, who had stopped by for dinner, spoke up from the corner. "Then don't watch. Learn. Sit in on the hearings. See how the game is really played when the stakes aren't your own." Marcus nodded slowly. He was about to see the system from the outside this time, and that would teach him more than any textbook. Marcus slipped into the gallery of the courthouse during Tasha's preliminary hearing. The atmosphere was too familiar. The sterile walls, the polished wood, the quiet hum of whispers. The prosecutor presented evidence. A fingerprint on a windowsill, a neighbor who thought they saw Tasha near the scene. Weak, circumstantial. Yet the tone of confidence was enough to sway the room. Tasha's public defender looked overwhelmed, fumbling through notes. Marcus's stomach twisted. He leaned toward Blake, who sat beside him. "This isn't fair. They're railroading her." Blake whispered back, "Now you see. This is what happens every day. You were just strong enough to fight it. Most aren't." The weight of those words pressed on Marcus's chest. By the end of the week, Marcus's name was trending again. But this time, it wasn't all positive. Anonymous blogs and social media accounts started posting headlines like, "Teen courtroom sensation exposed as fraud?" Marcus Reed's story doesn't add up. Some claimed he fabricated evidence. Others suggested he had been coached. At dinner, Janet slammed her phone on the table. "This is slander. They're trying to bury you." Marcus stayed quiet, scrolling through the comments. Some people defended him, but the smear campaign was spreading. Blake shook his head. "This is how power fights back. Not always in the courtroom. Sometimes in the shadows." Marcus clenched his jaw. If they thought lies would silence him, they didn't know him at all. Just as the smear campaign heated up, Marcus received an unexpected email. It was from Professor Elaine Porter, a respected constitutional law scholar at the university. She had seen the trial footage and wanted Marcus to join a panel discussion on youth, justice, and reform. Marcus showed the email to Blake. "Do you go?" Blake smiled faintly. "This isn't just an invitation. It's validation. If the academics are calling, it means your voice matters beyond headlines." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. He had gone from a defendant fighting for his freedom to a voice being asked to shape the conversation. And this was only the beginning. The auditorium was filled with professors, students, journalists, and community leaders. Marcus sat on stage beside seasoned academics, his hoodie swapped for a clean shirt and blazer. When it was his turn to speak, he leaned toward the microphone. Justice shouldn't depend on who can afford the best lawyer or who fits the right description. It should depend on truth. But too often, truth gets buried under assumptions. The crowd erupted in applause. Some even rose to their feet. Professor Porter leaned toward him, whispering, "You've got more than talent, Marcus. You've got conviction. Don't lose that." Marcus nodded, though inside he felt the weight of something larger. He wasn't just speaking for himself anymore. He was carrying stories of countless others. That night, Marcus's phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "Careful, Reed. You're getting too loud." His stomach dropped. This wasn't just a smear campaign anymore. Someone wanted him silenced. He showed Blake the message. The older man's face darkened. "This is no longer just ambition. This is danger. If you're going to keep pushing, you need protection. And allies." Marcus nodded, his pulse steady. "Then I'll find them, because I'm not backing down." It was late evening when Marcus's phone buzzed. He almost ignored it, thinking it was another reporter. But when he answered, a shaky voice whispered, "Marcus, this is Tasha Bell." Marcus straightened in his chair. The girl whose trial he had watched. "They're railroading me," she said, her words breaking. "My lawyer won't fight. He keeps telling me to take a plea. I didn't steal anything. Please, I don't know who else to call." Marcus froze. He wasn't licensed, wasn't a lawyer. But he also remembered what it felt like to sit at that defense table, everyone convinced of his guilt. "Don't give up," he said firmly. "I'll help you find a way." For the first time, Marcus wasn't just defending himself. He was stepping into someone else's fight. The next morning, Marcus met Arthur Blake at the courthouse steps. "She called me," Marcus said quickly. "Tasha. They're pushing her to plead guilty. She's innocent. I have to do something." Blake studied him, his brows furrowed. "Marcus, you're not licensed. You can't represent her." "I know," Marcus admitted. "But I can sit with her. Help her see what questions to ask. Help her prepare. Anything's better than watching her sink." Blake sighed. "This isn't about what you can or can't do legally. It's about what you're willing to risk. The system already hates you. Step into this and you'll paint an even bigger target." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Then let them aim. I won't stand by." Blake's expression softened. Equal parts concern and pride. "All right, kid. Let's make sure you don't drown trying to save someone else." Marcus and Blake met Tasha in a cramped consultation room at the jail. She looked exhausted, her hands trembling as she twisted the fabric of her jumpsuit. "They keep saying the fingerprint proves I was there," she whispered. "But I wasn't. I was blocks away, walking home from work. No one believes me." Marcus leaned forward. "Then we'll make them listen. Did anyone see you? Anyone who can confirm where you were?" "My manager at the diner," she said quickly. "And a customer who paid in cash. He asked for extra napkins. I don't know his name, but I remember his face." Blake scribbled notes, nodding. "We'll track them down." Tasha's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you even helping me? You don't know me." Marcus's answer was steady. "Because I know what it's like to be in that chair. And I promised myself I wouldn't be the last one to walk out of it free." For the next week, Marcus and Blake hit the streets. They visited the diner where Tasha worked, tracking down her manager and pulling security footage. Sure enough, there she was, serving tables at the exact time the burglary supposedly occurred. The grainy video wasn't perfect, but it was proof. They also canvassed the neighborhood until they found the customer she remembered. A retired mailman named Edwin Clark, who happily confirmed, "Yes, she was there. I saw her, clear as day." Marcus grinned for the first time in days. "We've got her alibi." Blake clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Now let's see if the court is willing to hear it." The day of Tasha's hearing arrived. The courtroom buzzed with reporters. The public was eager to see if Marcus Reed, the teen who beat the system, would show up again. Tasha's public defender still looked timid, but this time, Marcus sat beside her at the defense table, whispering pointers. When the prosecutor tried to wave off her alibi, Marcus leaned forward. "Ask for the footage," he urged. The lawyer cleared his throat, standing shakily. "Your Honor, we have video evidence placing my client at work during the alleged crime." Gasps rippled through the gallery. The prosecutor's smirk faltered. For the first time, Tasha lifted her head, her eyes shining with hope. When the state brought their key witness to the stand, the neighbor who claimed to have seen Tasha near the scene, Marcus's pulse quickened. The man hesitated under questioning. I think it was her. It was dark, but I'm pretty sure." Marcus whispered urgently. "Have him confirm the distance, the lighting." The lawyer followed Marcus's cue. "Sir, how far away were you?" The man squirmed. "Across the street." "And what time of night was it?" "Past midnight." "Streetlights working?" A pause. "Only one, and it was flickering." The gallery stirred. The testimony was crumbling. Marcus glanced at Tasha. For the first time, she smiled. By the end of the hearing, the evidence against Tasha looked weak. The alibi was solid, the eyewitness unreliable. Judge Miriam Delgado, a sharp-eyed woman with decades on the bench, leaned back and sighed. Given the presented evidence, the state has failed to meet the burden required for trial. Case dismissed. Tasha gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she turned to Marcus. "You saved me." Marcus shook his head softly. "No. You saved yourself. I just helped the truth get heard." Reporters swarmed the moment they left the courtroom, shouting questions. But Marcus wasn't listening. He was already thinking of the next case, the next voice waiting to be heard. That night, Marcus returned home to find the apartment door slightly ajar. His stomach dropped. Inside, drawers were pulled open, papers scattered. On his desk, a single note sat beneath a cracked photo frame. "Last warning. Stay out of it." His mother's voice shook as she picked it up. "Marcus, what are we getting into?" He clenched his fists, fury and fear battling inside him. "The truth," he said quietly. "And that's exactly why they're scared." The next morning, the story exploded nationwide. Teen hero helps clear wrongfully accused woman. Major news outlets picked it up. Talk shows invited him back. His name wasn't just trending in the city anymore. It was spreading across the country. Community activists reached out, asking him to speak at rallies. Law students sent messages of admiration. But with every headline, Marcus felt the pressure mounting. He wasn't just Marcus Reed anymore. He was becoming a symbol the powerful wanted to erase. Late that night, Marcus sat at his desk, staring at his law school acceptance papers. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up a pen. "I don't know where this will end," he whispered to himself, "but I know where it starts, right here." He signed his name with a steady stroke. It wasn't just paperwork. It was a vow. He wasn't going to stop. Not for threats. Not for fear. Not for anyone. Marcus Reed's journey had started as a desperate fight to clear his own name. But now it had become something far greater. He was no longer just the teenager who stunned a courtroom. He was a voice for the unheard, a fighter for the forgotten, and a reminder that truth could still break through the cracks of a flawed system. The threats would keep coming. The opposition would grow stronger. But so would Marcus, because his story wasn't just about one case, one trial, or one dismissal. It was about a promise that he would never stop fighting, not until justice wasn't a privilege, but a right. And with that vow burning inside him, Marcus Reed stepped forward into a future he was determined to change.